Welcome back, y'all. So in this video, like I said, we're going to actually start to add some elements to the view controller here. So like I said just a minute ago, I want to just reiterate this one more time. What we're looking at right here is the view controller layout. This thing that we're looking at is not responsible for logic. It's just responsible for what the user is going to see. So inside this view controller layout is, like I said, where we're going to add the buttons, we're going to add the text fields, we're going to add the labels and all that. And we're also going to add what are called constraints to these items so that they stay in the correct position that they're supposed to on all device sizes. This is something that's really important as an iOS developer, is obviously to test your code on different device sizes, make sure that it's looking good on an iPad, making sure it's looking good on an iPhone. So we use constraints to make that happen. So I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like here. So we're just going to go ahead and add 3 elements to the screen because that's all that we're going to need for this application. So the first element that we're going to need for the application is a text field. So if we click that little plus button at the top there and start typing text field, we're going to see this pop up. This is exactly what we're looking for. And by the way, you can see a little description over here of what this thing is used for. So a text field is something that the user can type into on their keyboard, and that's pretty much all it does. The user can type in it, you can see when they type in it and do different things. But that's basically all that a text field is just a way for the user to start typing text into. So let's go ahead and drag that onto the view controller here, and we can see these little blue lines starting to pop up that help us position it in the right place on the screen. So let's go ahead and put this in the center of the screen. That's kind of what the design calls for. Okay, so now we've placed it on the screen and those little handy lines helped us center it or whatever, but that actually doesn't mean that this element is going to be centered on all devices. That just means that right here, if you look at the bottom here, we're looking at an iPhone 11. All that means is this element will be centered on an iPhone 11, but if we go to a different device size, like let's say we went to a iPad Pro, you could see that now it's no longer centered, and you're probably wondering why. Well, let me show you. Let's go back to an iPhone 11 Pro real quick. Or I think we're on an iPhone 11. Let's go to an iPhone 11. And okay, so we're back to center here. So why is it changing? Why is it going everywhere? That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, right? So let's go up to this little ruler icon up here. This is the size inspector. And we can see a few things here. We can see that the X position of this element is 159 pixels and the Y position is 431. So that's where we positioned it. So now the size of an iPhone 11 is, let's say, I don't know the exact numbers, but let's say it's 400 pixels wide and I don't know, 800 or 900 pixels tall. Well, that would mean that this item is centered then based on those properties. But once we go to an once we go to an iPad, it's still going to be 159 and 431, but the iPad size is bigger, so it's no longer centered anymore. It's kind of going to be in the top left. So how do we make sure that items stick to the right place? Well, we have to use constraints, and constraints allow us to do a lot of different things. So let's click this little guy right here, the little middle icon here. And this is where we can add like pin constraints. So the first set of constraints that we're going to add to this guy is we're going to make him 20 pixels from the left and 20 pixels from the right. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to uncheck this little constrain to margins thing right here. All that this means is if you leave this checked, Apple by default, I think this happened in iOS 8, they made it so that certain views have like 8 pixels of just natural padding on either side, but we're going to go ahead and specifically set the margins from the sides, so we don't need to let it do that automatic business. We're just going to do it ourselves. So let's make it 20 pixels from the left, and let's make it 20 pixels from the right. And then in addition to that, I want to go ahead and set the height of this text field. And I'm going to do that by clicking this little height thing right here, and I'm going to change this value to 40, and I'm going to add 3 constraints. Okay, so we've got a little bit done, but you're seeing some red lines here. Anytime you see red lines, or if you see a little red arrow up here, that means that it's missing constraints to fully position this item. And actually, if we click on this little thing, we're going to see that this text field is missing a Y position. It says, okay, I know you want me 20 pixels from the right, and I know you want me 20 pixels from the left, and I know you want me to be 40 pixels tall, but I don't know where to be on the Y axis. I don't know where you want me to be vertically on the page. You need to tell me that. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to click this other little guy right here to the left of the option we were just on, and we're going to click this vertically in container thing. And we'll give it a value of 0. Oh, for some reason it's not. Oh, I don't think I was clicked on the text field. So sorry, click on the text field and then click vertically in container and click add one constraint. Now all the red lines are gone, everything's happy, and it's saying, okay, cool, I know to be 20 pixels from the left, I know to be 20 pixels from the right, I know to be vertically inside the view controller, and I know that I'm supposed to be 40 pixels tall, so everything's good. I'm perfectly happy with this. So now if we go ahead and, let me not run on my personal phone. Let me run on this iPhone 11 Pro simulator here. And we'll see, once it actually finishes loading, we'll see that we've got this text field right in the middle here, and we can type in it and do whatever we want. By the way, if you see like a little keyboard pop up, if we press Command K, we can kind of toggle that keyboard up and down. Let's go ahead and leave the keyboard down for right now. You can actually just type with your computer keyboard, which is what I typically do when I'm debugging. The only time that I really pop up the keyboard is if I need to like test, I don't know, make sure that something's not hidden or something like that. Which, yeah, that's another thing that we'll talk about later. But for now, let's just go ahead and use the regular keyboard on our thing. So we've got this text field here, but we can't really do anything with it. So before we get into actually adding some logic, let's make sure that if we go back to the iPad now, that it updates accordingly. And as you can see here, it definitely does. It's still vertically in the container. It's 20 pixels from the right and left, and it's still 40 pixels tall. So it's doing everything that we want it to do. So let's go back to the iPhone 11 one more time, and let's go ahead and add the other two elements that we're going to need to make this project possible. We're going to need a label here. And for this label, I'm going to make it 40 pixels from the top. I'm going to make it 20 from the left and 20 from the right. And if you just click these little lines right here, that is going to turn that constraint on or off. You can see that if I click on the little red thing and it isn't highlighted anymore, it says add 2 constraints, but if I click it again, it's going to add 3 constraints. So make sure that you've got red lines on every constraint that you want to add. So again, we're going to be 40 pixels from the top, 20 from the left and right. I'm going to turn off that constraint to margins again because I just want to set it manually to 40, 20, and 20. And we'll go ahead and add those 3 constraints. Okay, cool. So now this thing just says label, though. That's not really what we're going for. We want it to say hello world when we start the application. So let's go ahead and type that here. So if you click on the label, make sure that you're clicked on the inspector thing right here and type hello world in this little box right here. And then for me, I'm going to make this 24 pixels in font. You could do that by just clicking these little arrows right here. And then I want it to be bold. So if I click on this little T icon right here and I change style to bold, done. Now I've got bold text. And lastly, I want to center the text. So we can click this little alignment button right here to align it centered. Okay, so we're 2/3 of the way there. We've got the text field, we've got the label here at the top, and then lastly, we need a submit button. So if I click the little plus button, I'm going to drag button onto the screen right here. And then for this one, I'm going to go 20 pixels from the left, 20 pixels from the right, and 40 pixels from the bottom. And one more time, I'm going to go ahead and unclick this constraint to margins thing. And I'm going to make the height of this button actually 40 pixels. By default, it will be as tall as the font that's inside of it, but I want to manually set this to 40 pixels tall. So we're going to add those 4 constraints. And then let's change this to say submit. And lastly, based on the design that I showed you previously, the text color was actually black. So let's scroll down here and click black. And let's set the font to bold. And I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger. We'll make it 16 pixels. And then lastly, if we scroll down a little bit, we can see this background property. Let's set the background property to system green. Okay, so now this looks exactly like the application that I showed you in the introduction for this video. So let's go ahead and run that. And we can see that now we have an application that looks exactly like the one that I showed you. Now our only problem is that if we type and we click submit, nothing's actually going to happen because we haven't added any logic yet. So this video, this kind of sums up just working with the layout, but like I told you, this doesn't actually do any logic. So in the next video, we're going to be hooking up this layout to some code and actually manipulate the screen a little bit. So I'll see you in the next video.